Good morning and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Dave Deacon, filling in for Lyndall Stout this week, and we are talking canola harvest with Josh Bouchon. How is the crop progressing?
Well, the crop's progressing just fine. A lot of guys are able to get their crop harvested this week. Some guys that we've been waiting to get in the fields because it's been so muddy.
Yeah.
So that's one of those good problems to have, I guess. Some guys are facing a few issues still. We've had some green seed content issues. We're only allowed 2% at the elevator, so some guys that desiccated too early or maybe swathed too early. We were seeing some issues with the green count. We've seen some sprouting issues where the seed started sprouting in the pod. A lot of that goes back to the stress conditions and the overall all the rain we got. So, but for the most part, harvest has been going pretty well. It's been picking up last several days as the crop started to dry down. Yields have been pretty remarkable for what we've been through this year. We've had some guys in southwest Oklahoma getting 40 to 50 bushels. A lot of guys are in that upper teens to low 20s, but we are finding several fields out there that are surprising us. Some fields that we thought were maybe around that 20 bushel mark are making 40, 45 bushels. So once again, the crop surprises us, and this year for the better, but we're still getting some fields out, and we still have a couple weeks left to get all the crop off.
Let's take a look back at this year's crop. We didn't have the big freezes that we had in previous years, but there still were a couple of issues that came up.
Yeah, some areas of the state, north central Oklahoma in particular, we were drought stressed dormant. So we didn't break dormancy till fairly late. So some of these crops didn't start flowering till real late. Some of those fields took advantage of those late rains we got this year. Like you said, we didn't really have any freezes in April, so that didn't really hinder the crop. So for the most part, we had a good pod set. We didn't skip on any pods. And for the most part, we've had good seed set. We've had fairly mild temperatures when we're setting those seeds and good moisture when we're filling those seeds. So we have pretty good seed size this year, and all that kind of contributes to the yields we're seeing.
What were the planted acres like in this crop?
This year we're a little bit low. That kind of goes back to the grim look we had at planting time. We were extremely dry, and the planting window we just didn't have enough time. So acres are a little bit down this year. We're thinking somewhere around 165,000 acres for Oklahoma. Last year is almost 250,000 acres. So looking into next year, we're going to see some things influence those acres. One obviously be the price of canola. The commodity prices right now are starting to rebound. One would be crop insurance, whether or not they have favorable crop insurance, and two, planting conditions. Like I said, this past year, that was our biggest hindrance on the canola acres. We were just too dry. If we continue to get some good rains up till August and get some good soil profile built up, moisture, and have some decent planting days in late September, we're going to see those acres come right back.
Well, much like we just got here while we're shooting, those timely rainfalls kind of helped the crop this year.
Yeah, it kind of stayed more or less semi-dormant until it got that rainfall. Canola being an indeterminate crop has the capability to rebound once it gets more favorable growing conditions. And this year is moisture, obviously. So once we start getting those rains, that crop really responded quite well. So looking at next year, we're going to review a lot of these issues we faced this year at our annual Winter Canola Conference. This year it's going to be July 14th in Enid, and then the second one will be in Vernon, Texas on July 15th. So we're just south of the Red River this year, but both meetings are going to be very similar. So any producer who wants to go to either one of those is more than welcome. And we're going to share a lot of information on what we learned on research, what we learned on farm trials, and anything else we can pass on to the producer. So.
Okay, thank you much, Josh Bouchon, and we'll be checking in with you a little bit later to see how the final crop works out. And you can find a link to that conference on our website, sunup.okstate.edu. The month of May brought some record rainfalls to Oklahoma. Here's Brian Arnell on how that may have affected the summer crops.
With the recent rains finally wrapping up, we've had a lot of wet ground. We do have a lot of good corn and sorghum that have gotten in the ground, germinated and up, but it's gone through a lot of conditions. All this rain has had impact on the fertility issues as we look at some of these summer crops. Two primary concerns I have that we need to look at. First is the sandy ground near rivers. If you have corn or sorghum on sandy ground, well-drained sandy ground, there's a good likelihood that our mobile nutrients have moved through that profile. I've done a lot of scouting recently, seen a fair deal of nitrogen and sulfur deficiencies on some of the deep, well-drained sandy soils that have had a lot of rain. Keep an eye on it. Look for that yellowing of the tissue. Yellowing of older tissue will be indication of nitrogen deficiency, while upper new growth is more likely going to be a sulfur deficiency. While we don't commonly see sulfur in Oklahoma, this is a year and this is a scenario I'd expect to see some indications of some sulfur deficiencies, again on deep, well-drained sandy soils that's had a lot of rain. On the other side, kind of like what we see here, there's going to be a significant amount of corn and sorghum that's coming up in wet soils that have held water for a significant amount of time. In that area, we're likely looking at volatilization. We've probably had losses of nitrogen going upwards. Not only is the crop stunted, it hasn't been able to grow because of the cold, wet soils and lack of oxygen, but we've also likely lost a good deal of nitrogen as the water set and pounded there for a long time. We have two options for this to look at. One is go ahead and go out there now as you're scouting, look for those yellow patches as the soil's warming up, as that crop is growing again. You can do a poor man's variable rate fertilizer by going and just hitting those low areas that are yellow with nitrogen now, or you can go field wide. Overall, be looking for deficiencies of our mobile nutrients in your summer crops, nitrogen, sulfur, boron, chloride, those nutrients that will move with water. If it's been standing water though, nitrogen is our biggest nutrient of concern.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. Tuesday ended any doubts about the arrival of summer weather. Tuesday afternoon, June 10th, 2 Oklahoma locations had the first 100-plus air temperature highs of the year. And neither location was really a surprise. Altus and Grandfield both made it to highs of 101 degrees. Checking on the apparent temperature, or what it felt like on Tuesday, 17 Mesonet locations hit 100-plus apparent temperature degrees. Pawnee and Bixby reached 102. Bowlegs, Pryor, and Foraker Mesonet sites had apparent temperatures 7 degrees higher than the actual air temperature. The actual air temperature was 93, while the apparent temperature was 100. To avoid heat stress, drink more water and increase the number and length of breaks in the shade. The arrival of summer heat has shown up in 10-inch soil moisture. The negative changes in fractional water index from June 2nd to June 9th was the highest in the dark purple-gray areas. Rain and high humidities have created ideal conditions for plant diseases. Remember that fungicides work like paint. They need to go on early before the next round of wet weather arrives. Here's Gary with a look at rainfall.
Thanks, Alan. Good morning, everyone. Well, I don't have a new drought monitor map to show you because there's no drought in Oklahoma. However, it has been getting dry lately. So let's take a look at the latest Mesonet rainfall maps and see what we have. It's been downright dry since June 1st, with more than half of the Mesonet stations not seeing a single drop of rain through the 10th at least. In fact, it's been the fourth driest first 10 days of June since at least 1921, with a statewide average of a meager 0.12 inches of rain. That's more than 1.5 inches below normal for that time period. Now I'm going to take you way out to the December through February months. We hopefully have that El Nino still in place and actually strengthening. The outlooks from the Climate Prediction Center for the coming winter, although it's a long ways away, we see increased odds of below normal temperatures for the southern half of the state and increased odds of above normal precipitation for most of the state, all except the northeastern corner. So El Nino probably saved us a little during the spring. Let's hope it keeps its act together and helps us during the fall and winter too, and we won't go back into drought. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
We're out here at OSU's Range Cow Research Center with Dave Lawman, our Extension Beef Cattle Specialist, where a unique study is going on regarding beef cows and milk production. And the team, of course, is working behind us. Give us an overview of what this study is all about.
Okay. Producers don't have the opportunity to measure milk production, and so that's part of our job as scientists, is to maybe kind of fine-tune on production practices where producers can't. And so this is a fairly typical set of Angus and Angus crossbred beef cows. And so we're going to try to milk them about every 28 days through the summer, and then perhaps even several years in a row, to see what level of milk they give, how it changes with different forage quality, and how it changes with different energy availability if we were to provide that for them in the dry lot. In the dry lot, because we can control the amount of energy they get. The bottom line is, Linda, we're going to see if changes in energy availability improve their efficiency of milk production.
So we hear a lot about efficiency. That's the reason you want to study this in the first place?
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting that about 30 years ago, as near as we can tell, the average milk yield in the beef cattle industry was somewhere around 12 to 15 pounds. We milked 55 cows here Wednesday morning, and the average yield on this set of cows was 30 pounds. And these cows, I think, as I mentioned, would pretty well represent an industry average. So we had a kind of interesting, we had a low milk yield of 17 and a high of 53. So a lot of variation in those 55 cows.
And their milk output, how did it relate to the size of the cow?
It did not. So we looked at that just yesterday after we got the data kind of summarized and just did a regression with cow weight, and there was no relationship. It'll be interesting to see over time if that continues to be the case. The little cows give about as much milk on average as the big cows.
So these cows that are producing more milk, what are their nutrition needs? How does that translate to what goes on at feeding time?
That's a good question. The more milk a cow produces, the higher her energy and protein requirements are. I mean, it takes energy and protein to produce milk. It's also interesting that her maintenance requirements are higher, just like a Holstein cow's maintenance requirements are higher. And that's a requirement that's within 365 days a year, whether they're producing milk or not. So it's important. In fact, it's been estimated that about 70% of the energy used to produce 1 pound of beef is used by the cow, the beef cow, okay? So that includes feedlot phase, stocker phase, and everything. So the cow's nutrient requirements are a really important piece of the overall beef production efficiency picture.
So if I have a high producing cow in my herd, does that translate naturally into a higher weight for the calf at weaning time?
Not necessarily, and that's one of the concerns and another good reason for projects like this. As far as we can tell, over the last 20 years or so, average weaning weights across the industry have stopped increasing, okay, in commercial operations. Probably they are still increasing somewhat in purebred operations, but in commercial operations where you generally have lower inputs, they have stopped increasing. So on the other hand, the genetic trend for milk production genetic potential for milk in the cattle industry, beef cattle industry, continues to increase. So what that tells us is that what we may be doing is, well, we may be creating a factory that is more expensive to operate but not producing any more widgets.
So the takeaway in terms of sustainability, what's the message there for producers?
The message is, and it's a difficult thing for them to figure out exactly how much genetic potential for milk they need. It's kind of a challenge, but the message is that extremes in that trait, it's particularly from a nutritional standpoint, are probably not a good idea. And from the industry average standpoint, we're probably about maxed out as far as what our forage resources can handle.
Okay, Dave Lawman, thanks a lot. Thanks for having us out here, to you and the team for showing us your research and explaining what's all about, and of course keep us posted on
You're welcome.
how it all turns out.
Will do.
One of the real keys to having an efficient commercial cow herd is having a confined or a defined breeding and therefore calving season. And by that I mean that basically we would have the bulls out with the cows for only perhaps 2.5 months, and then we'd put the bulls up in another separate lot or pasture away from the cows the rest of the year. This increases our efficiency because we can feed the cows throughout the remainder of the year in much more appropriate fashion. In other words, we have cows in the same stage of production throughout the rest of the year so that they can be fed according to where they are in terms of their pregnancy, whether they're lactating, or whether they're still open cows. One of the real challenges to having a defined breeding season, especially for small producers, is what to do with the bull the other 9.5, 10 months out of the year. We called around to different beef specialists around the country and asked them to give us ideas of fencing designs to keep bulls away from cows in especially small ranching operations. The best one, I think, came from Clemson University in South Carolina several years ago. What they suggested was using a 5-wire electric fence. And there's several different ways that we can go about that. They basically used a high tensile, smooth, heavy gauged wire placed at 10 inches above the ground, and then every 10 inches so that you finally end up with a 50-inch fence. They put the grounds attached to the first and the fourth wires, and then attached those to stakes that went 4 to 6 feet deep into the ground. Another alternative that you might consider is to make the live wires 1, 3, and 5, like we show in this particular diagram. This, I think, makes the fence a little more versatile so that not only can we keep bulls into their appropriate pasture, we might be able to use the fence for a weaning pasture as we do our fence line weaning, keeping the cows separate from the calves. It's important, of course, to use a good energy charger on these fences. One that will really do the job to give those bulls a jolt if they try to go through that fence. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Joining us now is Kim Anderson, our grain marketing specialist. And Kim, the USDA released the wheat production estimates. What do they say?
Well, they had Oklahoma's wheat crop come in at 114.8 million bushels. You can compare that to about 48 million bushels last year. Hard red winter wheat crop at 887 million bushels compared to 738 last year. And all wheat at 2.12 billion bushels compared to 2.03 billion bushels last year. So you see we got significantly more hard red winter wheat and significantly higher Oklahoma wheat production.
And how is that Oklahoma crop progressing?
Well, the southern part of the state, the bottom tier of the counties are just about completed with the harvest. The further north you go, the less that's been harvested. We're cutting clear across the entire state, so the harvest's going relatively good. Afraid it might get some rain this next week that'll slow that down.
Now let's talk about the crop quality.
Well, the elevators tell me it's either coming in very good or very bad, and that's test weights 58 to 60 plus pounds. It appears that the highest percentage of wheat is coming in at above 58 right now, but they are getting a significant amount of wheat, say 49 to 53 pound test weight.
Now, what's the discount for delivering 50-pound test weight?
Now we're talking some real dollars, because the terminal elevators, the flour mills, they don't want lower test weight wheat. You look at a discount schedule, the discount starts at about 58 pounds, and you get 3 cents a bushel, 6 cents a bushel as you go down. But once you hit 55.5 pounds, you're looking at a 20-cent discount there. And then for each half a pound test weight below 55.5 pounds, you get another nickel discount. So you got 50-pound test weight wheat, you're looking at $1 to $1.10 discount on that wheat.
So with higher production and lower prices, how do returns compare to last year?
Well, relatively well, because we got higher production. You look at our production, it's about 140% above last year. Our prices are about 25% less than last year. You combine our increased yield by the lower price, you get about a 77% increase in total returns or gross returns per acre because of the higher production, even though we got a lower price.
Now, what if a producer brings in that 50-pound test weight?
Then we got a problem. Rather than dealing with, say, $5.25 wheat, you're now dealing with $4.25% wheat. However, if you multiply it by the increased production, you're still got about a 40% increase in gross returns as compared to last year. I've said it all along, I'd rather have production as price, and this year just proves that.
All right, great information. We'll see you next week.
We're talking about food logos versus food labels today with Mandy Gross, the manager of Communication Services here at the Food and Ag Products Center. And Mandy, let's start with why it's important to understand the difference between logo and label.
Yes, we work with several small businesses who come to us and they say, I need a label. And our first question to them is, okay, do you have a logo? Do you have a brand that you're already using for your company or for your product? Most of the time they say, well, not really. And so that's where we stop them and say, okay, we need to develop a logo first. We need to develop your brand for your company, for your product, before we even start developing a label. And that's why it is so important for clients and for small businesses to understand the difference. They go hand in hand when developing your brand, but they are two very different items.
And we have some examples here of some things that you've consulted on.
Yes.
Let's take this jar of salsa, for example. Explain to me what the label is and what the logo is for those who may not understand the difference.
Yes. The Food and Ag Products Center helped develop Ace in the Bow's logo, and that is what is here right in the middle of the label. The label is this whole area, and it, of course, includes the logo, but it also includes other information that is very important to product. So the consumer knows exactly what is in this product, how they need to deal with it after they get home, whether refrigerated or whether it's shelf stable. It also includes the name, which is medium salsa, which is the name of the product. And then you have your net weight, you have your nutrition facts, you have your manufactured by, and you have your ingredient statement, and then a UPC code if they decide to do that.
And then the logo may go on other things as well.
You can use that for t-shirts, for your business cards, for letterhead, for promotional items. You want your messaging to be the same throughout all mediums.
And then it is one of the things that you guys offer here, in addition to consulting on recipe sizes and packaging and all the things that you do here. This is one other part of the picture for individuals and small businesses?
Yes. The first people that a client is going to see is our business and marketing team. And that's when they discuss, okay, what are your goals? Who is your audience? And then they go into, okay, do you have a logo? Do you have a label? And if they don't and they're interested in us helping them, then that's when I'm brought into the picture. And we do only work with small businesses. If a company is able to afford to have a logo or a label made, then we don't want to take that business away from ad agencies or PR agencies. And so we only help those companies who are in desperate need and don't have the funds to go out to those bigger companies.
And then sorting this out, you have a fact sheet that helps explain it all.
Yes, we develop a fact sheet that tells the difference between a logo and a label and also how they work together.
Okay, Mandy, thanks a lot. Logo versus labels. And for a link to that fact sheet, just go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
As we enter the summer months, a lot of landowners are considering mowing or haying native grass fields. If you're considering haying, remember that you should only hay native grass once per year, and the ideal time from a quality standpoint is early July, from about July 1st to about July 10th in Oklahoma. And make sure to not cut the hay below about 4 inches. Now, if you're going to just mow a field, not for hay production, but just to reduce the amount of standing grass in the field, you should really think about that and think about why you want to hay it, because this has a lot of potential negative implications to wildlife that are using that grass field. In particular, ground nesting birds, the peak is late May and through the month of June, so this is a really important time for those birds. And if you remove that grass cover, you're going to be destroying a lot of nests. But beyond that, white-tailed fawns are often in these tall grass fields, particularly during early June, and they're really susceptible to mowing equipment, as are rabbits. So if you're going to mow, I would at least recommend that you wait to later in the growing season, July and August, particularly if you're not worried about hay production from a quality standpoint. You can avoid a lot of wildlife mortality. And additionally, if you're worried about wildfire risk, we typically don't have much risk of wildfire in the months of May and June in most years, but by late July and August we might. So this would also, a later summer cutting would also minimize the potential for fuels around your home. So think about the timing of mowing your native grass fields, and further, if it's even necessary. Grass fields like this provide a lot of wildlife benefits, and by cutting those, you're certainly reducing the amount of wildlife and diversity that you might have on your property.
Well, thanks for joining us this week on SUNUP. If there's something on the show you'd like to learn more about, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu. And also check out our social media too. I'm Dave Deacon, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.